everyone, welcome back to another video and thank you so much for tuning in. Today I'm going to be making my Canoeing on the Lake soap. This is another part of the vacation series. This is one of my favorite things to do with my family when we have some time. So I'm going to start off by making my embeds for this soap, and I have some white soap dough that I want to be a nice yellow color to make some little suns to go on the top of this soap. So I'm just adding some turmeric powder and then I am kneading that into the soap dough to make it a beautiful golden sun color. Once I've got all that fully incorporated, I'm going to roll it out into a sausage shape and divide it into 21 parts to make my 21 embeds for the top of the soap. I like to roll it into a long sausage shape to get the embeds as even as possible. And then go ahead and roll those out to make sure they are under an inch each, and make sure I have all of the embeds that I need to go on the top of this soap and finish it up. I'm going to start out the main soap as ever by mixing my hot lye water solution with my hot oils. Now these are at about 100 degrees today. They are warmer than normal, but my studio is also at 100 degrees. It is very hot in my studio on the day that I am making this, and you can see that my lye water solution and my oils were having a little bit of problems mixing, and that's because as soon as my lye water solution hit the oils at the bottom of the bucket, it started to saponify very quickly. I do not know how these soap makers in the south, in Texas, other places like that, manage to make soap when it is over 100 degrees year round, but my soap definitely moved very quickly, as you will see in the video as we go through and make it. I did keep stirring it with my spatula. I definitely didn't want to hit this with a stick blender because that would make it move even faster, and eventually all of my oils incorporated into my lye water solution and thinned out a little bit. I went ahead once it was incorporated and divided that in half. This design is going to be a sculpted layer soap. So I'm starting out by dividing it in half and then in half again. The first part of my soap, I am making about a quarter of my batch, and that's going to be the canoe at the very bottom of the design. So I'm just dividing my batter here, and I'm going to work with a quarter first. I'm adding paprika to my soap batter, and that's going to give me a nice bright vibrant red color. There is no danger this soap is going to go through gel phase today, even if I leave it right on my countertop. It is so warm in this room, I don't need to put it in the oven to make sure it goes through gel. So I am incorporating my red paprika into my soap with my stick blender, and you can see that has caused it to set up pretty significantly. I am having to plop it into the mold here, but making this sculpted layer soap, it's just fine that it is nice and thick. It means I can sculpt it without having to wait around for it to set up at all. So I'm going to continue plopping that into my mold until I have all of my soap into my mold evenly, and then I'm going to just use my spatula here to scrape that into a nice canoe shape. This is the same technique that I've used in some previous videos, making sculpted layer soaps without any special tools. I like doing it this way. It means that I don't get any wasted soap and I get more of an organic shape. The trick with this is to get a very uniform triangle shape without any of the jagged edges that I normally like in my mountain soaps. So I'm going to spend a little bit of extra time and make sure I have a nice curve at the tip for the very tip of the canoe and nice straight edges. And the fact that this soap is setting up so fast is actually going to aid me with that. As you can see, this soap is smoothing out really nicely, and I'm going to take my spatula and just go right over the top to create a curve on top. And I'm just going to keep working on these two loaves of soap until I have the nice smooth edges that I'm looking for. Once I've got both of those in my molds, I'm going to go ahead and work with the next quarter of this soap, and this is going to be the lake water around the canoe. So this is going to be the other quarter that I separated out earlier. I'm going to add some indigo powder to this soap. You can see that this soap has already set up quite a bit, but my essential oil blend that I'm using here, which is Fir, Lavender and Wintergreen, which is a nice, beautiful, fresh, but woodsy, kind of outdoorsy scent. It's loosening up my soap nicely so that I can work with it and get my colour incorporated into the soap batter to get a nice watery blue colour. It's not going to do miracles and make my soap super thin by any means, but it does mean that I can get it fully incorporated, that colour dispersed, and I can get it into my molds without leaving any air gaps in my soap. So once I have all of that colour mixed in, I'm going to go ahead and spoon that into my molds, and I am just putting it either side of the canoe shape. The canoe has set up nicely, so it's not going anywhere, but I am being careful to make sure that I don't push it around any at all with this water. I'm tapping my soap down just to make sure I don't get any air bubbles in there and to get it evenly distributed and all the way down to the bottom of my mold, and then I leveled the top off. Now you can see just how thick my soap is getting, so I have to get a move on with this. The next layer I'm doing is the tree line around the top of the lake. So I'm adding a little bit more of my essential oil blend, which will help me incorporate this spirulina, which is going to be a nice deep green color for those trees. And luckily, most of the colors that I'm using today I can incorporate with my spatula and don't need to use a stick blender to fully disperse that into my colors. So I can just give it a mix with my spatula and not worry about using a stick blender, which will make it set up way more quickly. I am spooning this into my mold, and then I'm going to level it out as much as I can once I've got all of this green layer on the top. I want this green layer to be nice and textured so that it looks like a layer of trees, which are never perfectly even. So I'm using my fork and dragging the lines through the soap. Now with the way this soap is setting up, those lines are not going to stay super defined, which is just perfect for this design of the soap. It is going to give it some nice shape when I cut this bar. Now we have one more layer before we finish this soap off, and I have some mountains in the back of my design. So I'm just portioning off about a third of what I have left, and I'm going to colour that with some activated charcoal. I am stirring my soap a little bit to help loosen it up just a little bit more before I add my activated charcoal and essential oils. It's going to be easier to incorporate those once my soap is a little bit thinner, and these essential oils once again are going to loosen up my soap batter, but it is still going to be pretty thick, so I can go ahead and texture my soap right away. Now with these mountains, I don't want them to take up the whole loaf of soap or dominate the design at all, so I am going to be very precise with where I put this soap batter. In order to achieve that, I'm going to put my soap into this Ziploc bag, which I can use as a piping bag to get the soap exactly where I want it in the mold. I'm going to put all of my soap into the bag so I don't have to try and refill it halfway through, and then I'm going to snip the very corner off the bag, which will let me put the soap exactly where I want it in the mold. I'm going to go for 2 mountains in this design, one on the very edge of the soap loaf and then one in the second third of the loaf. You can see my molds are not the neatest that I'm using today. Unfortunately, with the way this soap is behaving, it's not neat to get into the mold at all, and I do have to hurry to get through this design and get it all in before I can't work with my soap at all. So I'm just squeezing my piping bag to get that soap into the mold, and once I have all of the soap in there, I'm going to use the back of a spoon to texture the soap and move it to where I want it. The mountains on the edges of my soap are going to be my tallest mountains, so I am doing a couple passes with my Ziploc bag of soap. Now I'm going to go ahead, as I said, and use my spoon to make that nice mountain shape in this design. I have got a little bit of soap left over that I'm going to fill in any gaps on those mountains wherever I need them. And as with my previous mountain soap, I really love the way that this technique gives me a nice jagged edge to my mountains. It's not uniform in every single bar. It's nice, rustic, just the way nature should be. So I'm going to keep working with my spoon and getting these mountains how I want them and getting all of my soap into the mold until I'm satisfied with the way that they look. Alright, now that that is done, it is time to add the last little bit of this soap, and thank goodness, see how firm this soap is getting. This is almost at the stage where I just can't work with it anymore. But I am going to go ahead and mix it up and then add some indigo powder into this soap to give me a nice blue colour for the sky. I'm adding my essential oil blend in, what I have left of it, and I've added some zinc oxide into that to give me a slightly lighter blue colour. And because I've already dispersed that zinc oxide into my essential oils, it means that I can go ahead and mix this in with my spatula. And you can see I have a nice lighter blue colour than the ocean. I am going to pop this into my molds and get it evenly distributed, and I am putting it right between those mountains so it's not going to push my mountains apart at all. Now, to make sure that this soap goes all the way down in between the mountains and the tree line, I'm going to tap it down on my workbench and get those tops as level as I can before adding the rest of that blue in. I've leveled the blue soap off on the top to make sure my molds are even, and then I'm going to go ahead and use the back of my spoon to texture the top. And I'm just pulling it in from one side to the other, and I am making sure to pull it in from the side that doesn't have that mountain, so it's not going to mess up my mountain design at all by creating this texture. It also means that when I place my sun embeds on top, it's going to look like those little balls of sun are rising up above the mountain. I did take my gloves off to add these soaps in. It just gives me a little bit more control, and I am being very, very careful not to get any of that fresh soap on my fingers. So here is a close-up look at the top of that soap. Those little suns sitting right in the sky look so adorable. We are back the next day to cut this soap, and I'm super excited to see how it turned out, and just a little bit nervous to make sure I didn't get any air bubbles in this soap. I've lined the soap up with my multi-bar cutter to make sure I don't cut any of those little sun embeds on the top. Taking away those end slivers, and let's have a look at the inside of this soap. You can see I got a nice smooth triangle on that canoe, and you can see the tree line has turned a little bit dark, but as these cure, that is going to lighten up quite significantly. I love the rustic tree line, the look of the unevenness and the mountains behind them. And those little canoes sitting in the lake look awesome. So let's take a final look at this soap. Those canoes sitting right there in the lake give it a unique perspective, and the tree line with the mountains behind it just remind me of a weekend spent out on the lake. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you next Tuesday.